I'm the director here of the Desert Laboratory at Tumamoke. So we are, this is our fourth of our series, and I'm curious how many people, I'm asking this each time because we're building, each lecture to the next. How many people have been with us for at least more than one or a couple of the lectures? That's awesome. That is totally great. So tonight so Eva Hidalgo, who's the science coordinator for Sea Shepherd, is literally drove here from San Felipe, from the front lines, I think it's a fair way to say it, to give us a report of what is happening out on the water right now. I think it's also important to note that you may have noticed that we had a couple individuals slated to be the presenters for tonight that aren't here. Because they work for the federal government in Mexico. Ana Luisa Figueroa, who's the director for the whole northwest region of CONAM, the Commission for Natural Protected Areas, and then Lorenzo Riojas, who's the head of CIRPA, the Vaquita Advisory Council. And it's more important that they're out in the field doing their jobs right now than actually taking time to come here. Things are so critical right now, and especially, and as Peggy's going to speak to a little bit, the response and the approach that the Mexican government taking is being refined in these days. And so it's very volatile being able to speak at those high levels for the Mexican government in our country right now, which isn't necessarily very welcome to other perspectives from other countries. So anyway, I thank you all for coming, and I want to make sure Peggy has plenty of time to bring us up to speed on what's been going on.
Yeah, well, first I wanted to bring you up to speak with SADO, the Intercultural Center for Study of Deserts and Oceans. This is our 40th year as an organization, and we have lots of celebrations planned. I think Alan wants to talk to you a little bit about some of the ways that we're planning to celebrate this year, and then I'll continue with telling you a little bit about what happened since our last Vaquita talk, and then introduce Eva.
Hi everyone, my name is Alan. I'm the Communications and Development Coordinator at SADO. And you'll notice on your chairs you have a little form. Please take this home with you tonight. This is an opportunity. We have a new legacy membership program. So because of some of this sort of transition and turmoil that you're going to be hearing about tonight, this is a very difficult time for grant funding for SADO. So we really are relying heavily on our individual supporters, and we realize that not everyone can be a gold anchor league member and whatnot, and maybe you can only give a little, but I promise you that even that little contribution is going to count a lot this year. So hopefully you'll consider becoming a member of SADO. If you haven't come down to visit us, hopefully you can do that soon too. We're making a lot of progress on our exhibits and that kind of thing. And I also brought a lot of merchandise tonight. So you'll see some people wearing Vaquita or Tatuaba shirts. Our goal for tonight is for everyone to leave with a t-shirt. So you're not allowed to go out these doors. You have to go out the table. And I'm taking credit cards. I'm taking cash. Brick Besesson is also in the audience tonight. And she wrote, there you go, she wrote a wonderful book about Vaquita, so we have signed copies of that. We have our tide calendar as well for 2019, and that has a very comprehensive description of some of the work that SADO is doing in the Northern Gulf.
So we're talking about a lot at the last lecture, because it captures a lot of the lessons that we've learned from 40 years of trying to solve this Vaquita problem. And we've put together this integrated solution, applying it on the eastern side of the Gulf, and now we're in discussions with the government trying to get them to adopt it for solving the Vaquita problem. In fact, that's exactly what happened after our last lecture. Just a couple of days after our last lecture, the government actually made a public announcement of their new strategy for the Upper Gulf, which was more of a comprehensive Northern Gulf strategy, which identified ordering fisheries in 3 areas where each community had governance and participated in making decisions about their fisheries with more involvement. And it didn't sit well with the communities. My opinion is that it was announced by Facebook, and not face-to-face with communities, and they felt like they had not been consulted. The government had been there in community meetings, but those meetings turned into yelling matches, so they weren't very effective meetings. So fishermen didn't take well to that, the new strategy, and in that new strategy, the government also announced that they were no longer going to be giving fishermen subsidies, which they had been receiving for the last couple of years, and that in particular didn't go over well. So in protest, 2 days later, they all decided and publicized that they were all going to go out to fish anyway. So they all went out en masse to fish, defying all the laws, and so it's been chaos. And our speaker tonight is going to, she's been in the field, basically she's with an organization called Sea Shepherd, and they started working in the area in 2016. Eva Hidalgo is a biologist from Spain. She studied in Spain, marine themes and marine acoustics, and then she came to the San Felipe area to be Sea Shepherd's science coordinator for their Operation Milagro, and I'll let her tell us more about it, but they've been very strategic in their operations in the field, and they've also been very strategic in the partnerships that they've developed. One of the first things they did was to come and talk to us, involve the government, and so their work has been done very well in my perspective. So Ava will be here to tell us about what's been happening in the last month. She said a few minutes ago that it's been very interesting, the reaction of both the government as well as fishermen to what's happening. But just as a last message, it's a dynamic situation. It's been that way for 40 years, and the solution requires a lot of different actors from several countries, the world, to move in the same direction at the same time, and that has not happened, and Vaquita is not doing well. The very good news is that the current government at least has made the decision that the environmental authorities and the fisheries authorities are going to speak with one voice, and they're going to coordinate on what happens in the Northern Gulf. That is one of the best things that's happened so far. They're very slow to actually implement anything, but that's just a general phenomena of this new government who has not operated. So they're very slow to get moving. So we're hoping they're going to get moving soon. So without further ado,
make sure you please silence all your cell phones.
Where is our speaker, Eva? Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us. It's a pleasure. I also want to honor Eric, who is there in the corner. Please stand up. Thank you for driving me all the way from Hungary. He's also a crew member in one of the ships right now, and he took the time to drive with me up to Tucson. Sorry, I'm learning how to pronounce it well. And it takes us like 7 hours or so, but I'm very excited to be here, and it was very important for me, especially because, we work closely with scientists such as Barbara, and she wrote me straight away and was like, they're a super engaged audience, they're super knowledgeable, and the discussions that are going to be generated after your talk are going to be very important and interesting, so I couldn't miss it, so we needed to make it. So anyway, here I'm also kind of coordinating the field efforts right now down in San Felipe, and it's a very important time, since the fishermen started coming out to sea again, everything kind of changed, so I'm not going to delay anymore this introduction. And I'm just going to kind of run you over a bit what I'm going to be talking about, which is pretty much an introduction of what Sea Shepherd is, just very brief, then of what we're doing in the Upper Gulf, and directly what's the situation. So if somebody doesn't follow because you haven't been in a lecture before, feel free to just like ask any questions at any moment. Like I would love this to be, I know the discussion will come later, but I would love this to be as interactive. I'm not good at just talking. So I would love this to, just ask me questions, anything you feel. Anyway, just no more delay. Just quickly, so Sea Shepherd is a marine conservation organization, and we've been working since 1977. We used to be like really well known by the campaigns that we had in Antarctica, like stopping whaling a few years ago. But since then, like we've been working like in many different campaigns, and these are just like some of our more recent ones where we've been investigating the effects of salmon farms in British Columbia. We've been also working a lot in the Revilla-Gigedo archipelago, also in Mexico, patrolling the area for any type of like illegal activities, and also working with other scientists and supporting a lot of research work based in Mexico, as well in the Guadalupe Island, also here in Baja. We are supporting the work of other scientists who also work with vaquita. So we do like lots of different campaigns, but our most important one right now, in my opinion, and as you may know, is Operation Milagro, which takes us to the Upper Gulf of California, just right there, which you all probably know very well. I was planning on being able to point, so having to choose.
There's a map right next to you too.
This.
Yeah, there's a map right there behind you. You can use point there too.
Okay, yes. So anyway, so you kind of know the area already. So I see that you have here the updated Vaquita Refuge, right? The one from like 2018. I think that one on the picture is still the old one. So as you know, right here on this very special area, corner of the planet, it's the only place on Earth that we can find the vaquita porpoise. So we know that the last numbers, based on acoustic monitoring and assessed by the CIRVA meeting, so the International Committee for the Recovery of the Vaquita, tells us that being super optimistic, we are up to 22 individuals. Then being, realistic, we may have around 10 to 15. And unfortunately, the lowest estimated number is around 5 individuals. So this is the last update, again, based in the acoustic monitoring program. But that cannot let us stop the efforts. That just pretty much motivate us even more to just keep pushing and keep working on this very important issue. I'm sure for everybody involved with it. So yeah, so that's right the area where we're working. We are kind of based out of San Felipe. So this town right here, which is right in front of the Vaquita Refuge. And pretty much that's our base of operations. So that's where we are docking our ships, or we're kind of provisioning, or where everything is happening. So our main work, or our main goal, is to be removing illegal fishing from the area, because this illegal fishing is what's believed to be the #1 cause of mortality and the #1 cause of the decline of the vaquita. I'm not gonna extend too much on this, but the main fishing gear that is the cause of death for the vaquita is that put in the water to catch totoaba fish. And that's also an illegal fisheries, and it's a very lucrative illegal market where the poachers that capture those totoabas only remove the swim bladder and kind of smuggle it into China, where they are sold by incredible high prices. So despite these fisheries being completely legal and the whole chain of consumption being considered illegal wildlife trade, it continues, and it's only believed to just to be growing as we speak. So pretty much we're working removing illegal gear since 2016, but the first time we were there was in 2015, and that's when we signed an agreement with the Mexican government. We mainly work with CONAN, Profepa, and the Navy, and this agreement allowed us to be able to retrieve any illegal fishing gear that we found in the water. This actually came after, on this first recognition trip to the field we did, we were observing a lot of illegal activities, but in one of those days that we were patrolling, we found an actual humpback whale that was entangled alive in that net. So I'll show you a video later that will explain better, but it was thanks to freeing that whale that we proposed to the Mexican government to start with this very important work of like taking out these illegal nets from the water so this couldn't happen. So that event was key, and it happened right after the Mexican government put a ban on gill net fishing on the whole area. So it kind of like was good timing to change, you know, like to allow us to be able to pull these nets out of the water. We also work with other organizations, which to me is like very important because we also work with fishermen in San Felipe with an organization that's called Pesca ABC. And it involves fishermen from the community that actually want to protect the vaquita and want to be a part of the solution. And they come out with their pangas, with their own boats, and start also looking for illegal nets in the water. And then we help them to retrieve them. We also work with another organization called Museo de la Ballena, who also has a boat up there, and we're kind of all coordinating the efforts to remove as many nets out of the water as possible. And yeah, and of course we do work a lot with scientists as well. Like right now we're currently also like deploying acoustic monitoring CPOTs, they're called, to also try to detect any clicks that we may find, to be able to use that as a media kind of like picking point to keep saying like, yes, they're still here, we still need to be working hard. And we work with Lorenzo, who's one of the scientists that was going to come with Barbara, and it's like a really tight network. It's like a really important team effort that's being played between science, conservation, and policy. That to me, and fishermen as well. So to me, that's like very important and impressive. So yeah, since 2015, that's when we signed our agreement, and since then, so like the first year, we retrieved 42 nets, then 116 on Operation Milagro 3, and Milagro 4, which was just last year, which was the most intense of them all. It was like 362 nets were retrieved. So that's a total of 779 that we have taken out of the water up to today. So that to me, like, it's a very impressive number, and it really shows what are the levels of illegal fishing. Yeah.
I have a question, just to put things in perspective.
Yes.
Was there a ban on fishing in the area prior to the ban to save the vaquitas and to get rid of the gill nets? My impression was way before that there was a ban because there was overfishing just in general. So to put this in perspective, I think probably one of the problems is that the fishermen have been hungry for a long time. Do you know anything about
So
that?
I'm not sure what was the status of the ban on fishing before the gill net. Like, I know there's always restrictions in terms of like quotas and vedas, and I'm sure like some people here will have more knowledge than I do prior to this. But what's clear is that like from 2015 it was like a ban on all gill net fishing of any kind, of any type, on all that area.
And they expanded the area to cover that whole triangle down below the reserve, that whole area.
Something like that. Like it was not just on the Vaquita refuge.
No,
it
but
was,
that whole
like
down even further. Yeah.
I
It
can
went all the way
go
down
back
there.
to the
Yeah.
map if you want, or later. If there's
And
more
that was,
questions.
had to do with just the gill nets, or it had to do with overfishing also?
I believe that decision was like mainly because of the vaquita,
Yeah.
to
Okay.
protect the vaquita, and it also applied to long lines at that time. So yes, so those, yes.
She wants to know, what is long line?
Sorry, long line is like those type of lines with like hooks being on it, and then those,
hooks
yeah.
on a 1 mile long line.
Mhm.
Wow.
And those are also put in place to capture totoabas. So that ban, we can get into these discussions later because I think this is going to be a long topic, but
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, that just saying that like in my opinion, it wasn't really a good solution because, like, you know, in theory the chain of command was that then compensations were going to be given to the fishermen, but like all that whole thing kind of like got lost in corruption and in people not getting their money and then those payments being stopped. So it was never really going to work on the long term, but it did allow us to be able to identify that all nets found out there, all pangas found out there, were totoaba pangas. So that made it really easy for us to do our job, but I don't necessarily agree with it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, the increase in nets, is that, I guess it's part, the increase in Sea Shepherd's activities.
Mhm.
Is it also an increase in netting? Are there more fishermen out there putting in more nets?
So those questions are always difficult, but my point of view, definitely is that we became better at catching the net, like mostly at finding them, which is like the hardest part of it, no? And then also in terms of at that point, because there was no any other type of fishing happening, like I feel it was kind of like a takeover the area type of thing for poachers in a way.
So they didn't have to sort out between the legal and the illegal, it was all illegal, so it was easier to identify illegal.
Yeah, which is the main issue that we're having right now, but that will come later too. So, just to give you an idea, in total during those years, more than 214 international crew have participated. Most of them, almost like 99% of them, all volunteers coming from all over the world, like all from everywhere, like I don't even know, like all over Europe, Mexico, like Latin America. Yes?
I just have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having trouble understanding you because you talk really fast.
Okay,
If you could slow down a bit.
of course. Let me know because I do speak very fast. I
Okay,
know,
that would be
I'm
great.
like conscious of it. So I'll try, and just please let me know because I just start getting excited and talking too much. But yeah, so the crew comes from all over the place, and yeah, definitely there's like crew members from the United States, from Mexico, Brazil, like Colombia, everywhere. And it's been like 5 ships participating over the times. This one on the picture, it's a U.S. Coast Guard vessel, and we actually have 3 of them, and they proved to be the most effective ones in terms of being able to find the nets and retrieve them very quickly. And they're also very safe because they were Coast Guard vessels, so they're kind of bulletproof and like their hull are very resistant. So it helps a lot in terms of this operation.
How big are
But that isn't an official U.S. Coast Guard, it's a Coast Guard type vessel.
Yeah.
And where is it flagged?
I don't remember, Barbuda, I believe. Because Antigua and Barbuda, like they've been super supportive of us, and in terms of that, they gave us a concession of marine conservation vessel, which I believe, I don't remember this properly, but I believe it's like the first vessel in the planet to be given that specific, you know, the same way that you're given commercial vessel or this or that, like marine conservation vessel. So that's why it's flagged on that region.
So is that flagged
It's a
that
lot.
way because you're trying to avoid any kind of international situation with Mexico or the United States?
No, it was actually flagged in the United States before, and I believe some of them are still flagged in the United States.
Okay.
It's just in that moment they offered to flag us, and it's just more convenient and better. It's kind of, we have a bit of a partnership as well, and we've been working there as well in other issues.
Typically, how big are the ships?
These ones, I believe they're up like 70 meters, something like
How
that.
many?
Island class,
70?
they're island class Coast Guard
Yeah.
carriers, 165 feet long.
They're 110 feet long and 20 feet wide.
There you go, the expert, better. Yeah, I may not be able to answer all technical questions related to the ships themselves, but you know, if there's any questions that I'm not able to answer or Eric is not able to answer, I'm happy to provide you with answers later because there's plenty of people that will be able to. So, okay, so sorry. So this is how we find the nest. So pretty much what we used to do a lot, which now we're going to be restricted on, but again, let's talk about it later. It's, we used to just patrol the waters and then be able to observe panga movements, and then we kind of studied their behavior. So we knew what is the orientation that they were putting their pangas on to be able to lay the nets in the water. We knew how long usually they would take into putting the net in the water or retrieving it. And based on that, we knew that those were poachers. So then we would write down the positions, and then later on, we would drive the ship over those positions, and then thanks to actually just like the fish finder, like the sonar that comes on board, we've calibrated them in a way that we are able to see those nets underwater. And their shape is actually pretty characteristic. I hope everybody can see it. It's some kind of like lollipop that shows up, where you just can see like this type of buoy, and then a line that goes like straight down. And it's usually around like 4 meters fall, 4 to 5 meters of, I don't know the word in English, of caída, like width type of thing, yeah. So that's one of the reasons why we were able to pull more nets as time goes by, because this system, for example, we only really discovered it last year, and that really kind of like escalated our efficiency a lot, because a lot of the times, like not even with the radar, we didn't even need the radar. Just like driving around, we are able to tell where the nets are and then just pull them.
Are the nets outlawed themselves? In other words, somebody is a producer of the nets?
Sorry?
Is it illegal to produce and manufacture the nets?
No, unfortunately not. They're actually, most of them made in China and just cheap, like super cheap. And
So they're not banned from import?
no, so I don't know what's the status of that. There was a proposition to ban any like the present, like anybody who would have these nets. Like they were not able to either possess them, not have them in their backyard, like nothing. But that didn't go ahead yet, and I don't know if it's gonna go. But anyway, a lot of the times when they get caught with those nets, they say, no, we're just heading to Ensenada, to the Pacific coast to use them. Like we're not using them up here where they're banned. So it's a very complicated. We've been trying to work also on the tracking of the manufacturing, but it's another one. So yes, once we do find the nets on the radar, what we do is, one of the systems is we build this type of like metal devices that we can drag behind the ships, and that they kind of levitate underwater at a specific depth. Depending on the depth that we are sailing, we set them up, and they catch these nets. So then they catch, and then we have a buoy system where they break off, and then we're able to then go back and retrieve those buoys and like retrieve those nets up on board, and just like start processing them and start like freeing any animals that are on them. So we either do that, or we also like use a hook that we put on the bow and we just drop, and the same, we kind of like drive backwards, and then that hook catches it, and we're able to just like start retrieving it. So this is kind of how we do it. So it's usually done from the bow, so like from the front of the ship, where we just kind of like keep the tension as we keep pulling it, and it's all manual. So it's like all the crew on board on deck, it's just like pulling it by hand, and any animal that come on board, we completely free and release if they're alive, and usually they're able to just like swim away, and that's like a really nice feeling. And then otherwise, unfortunately, they're not, but we kind of like record all that and keep track on every single species that get trapped on those nets. So I need my helper now, because we actually, well, first, thank you so much. Naomi or Noemi? Noemi. So Noemi here contacted us because she wanted to have a piece of one of those very nets to be able to show in one of her exhibitions, because she's very passionate about the vaquita, right? And has been, you wanna explain? Since when have you been?
Since 5, when I was 5, I learned about the vaquita, and I've been working on trying to save the vaquita ever since. And I contact the Desert Museum and Zoo to see if they would participate in International Save the Vaquita Day. And the zoo said I hope they're going to say yes. And the Desert Museum has already said yes. And I think it would be easier for people to see if I had nets how vaquita gets trapped in them. Why? Problem.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks to her, because otherwise I wouldn't have thought about it, we actually brought a piece of net that she will take with her, and then hopefully it's not too tangled already. And she can help me extend it this way. you see, these nets, this one, so I have to say, well, that unfortunately I couldn't get you like a whole one because these last couple of days we didn't find any, and these ones were already processed. But more or less for you to have an idea, so it's this line of floats that go on top, and then there's one of those floats usually every 130 centimeters or so. Sorry, talking centimeters. I don't know how to say it.
It's better, it's okay.
Okay, more or less. They're usually, so it's interesting as well, like lately we're finding them shorter. They're like up to 200 meters. Last year, some of them were up to like half a kilometer or 700 meters long. Yeah, so they're usually like 4 to 5 meters fall width, and the mesh is like 12 inches. So this mesh is like really big, and it's designed to catch totoaba. And unfortunately, totoabas usually are less than 2 meters, are up to like 1.5 meters to 2 meters. And unfortunately, that's the exact same size than a vaquita. So this type of mesh is very damaging for both of the species. And they also catch a lot of sharks, a lot of rays, and a lot of other big animals, unfortunately. So yeah, that would be the top part, and then on the bottom we would have a line of leads that makes it wait, and then it makes it stay, you know, like a wall for any type of animal that tries to go through. And they have a big anchor at the end of each side, so that anchor keeps them obviously anchored in the bottom, and they do not have any surface markers, obviously because they are illegal, so they don't want anybody to see them. And that's, you know, why we are only able to see them through the sonar that I was showing you. And this is where our ray or anything that we tow kind of like gets caught when it goes through, and then we just kind of like catch it and retrieve it. Yeah, I mean.
So if your sonar can pick up the nets,
Mm-hmm.
then how come the vaquita can't evade the nets since they're using sonar? The water's pretty murky, right? So they're using their sonar
Yeah.
a lot to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's something I don't really get.
We had that question a million times and discussed it with Barbara and with everyone, and we just don't know. We actually wanted to know if the growth, because these nets sometimes are left, because a lot of the times they pick them up, but sometimes they just don't because they don't want to be caught with them, or maybe they were being prosecuted, so they just left them. So there's like plenty of times that we just find them there, and they are like full of growth. So we were wondering if like the more growth they have, they may be able to see them or not, and like all these questions. But I mean, our sonar picks it up like from the top. So I think that kind of gives you the reading of like, you know, way more surface than it could be if a vaquita, I guess. It's just trying to catch the reflection of this mesh. But we will never really know.
Someone had mentioned in a previous lecture
Yeah.
that they're aware that they're there, but they're kind of like zipping through these paths that they know,
Yeah.
and if they just barely brush their fin against them, they get
Can just caught. Yeah, that's maybe as well. I mean, even if they see something, I guess it's pretty hard to figure out in their environment what this is. So, yeah.
Have you found any vaquitas in all these nets that you pulled?
Yeah, we found one a month ago, and unfortunately I have to say that I was the one, you know, like there as well, and seeing it. And it was actually a pretty old net. It was around like 1 week or 2 weeks old. It didn't have the head, unfortunately, so it was a process to identify it, because morphologically, like we could see that the size was like a vaquita, and it also had the same type of fins. It had like, I don't know if you know, like they have like a vestigial phalange on their fins, so you could see how a bit of the protuberance from that being there was, but we had to wait obviously for genetic analysis and stuff. But yeah, unfortunately at the end it was like confirmed that it was a vaquita, and it was just a month ago. So I'll show you later on a map exactly where it was, but it was like right on the area where we believe they are. So yeah.
So are they raising these vaquita in captivity to try to make up the difference?
No, so they tried a program last year that was called Vaquita CPR, that I'm sure you heard from Barbara about previously. But they tried to like capture some of them, to have them fenced off on this facility within their habitat, to try to protect them from illegal fishing. but that didn't really work out because they couldn't withstand the stress of being captured. So unfortunately, one of them they had to release quickly when they were seeing that their vitals were going too high in terms of like heart rates, and then the second one, unfortunately, it passed out due to the stress of the situation. So they decided to abandon the program because obviously it was too risky. So yeah.
Okay, going back a little to what I was saying before, I'm sure it's good to look for the gill nets, but I think, to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, but to me, it's a very complex problem. And going after the gill nets is a little like putting your finger in the dike, because there's so much complexity to the problem beyond that. You know, somebody was asking just now about, you know, where the fishermen get the nets. Well, I'm sure that's not a problem, because you have involved the Chinese and the mafia with huge amounts of money. They can afford to give away as many gill nets as they want. So there's, and protect people, so there's all of that. And, you know, as I said, I think it's, you probably have a community of fishermen who have been hungry for a long time, and there's not a lot of other work there. So the problem also, I think, needs to be approached, hopefully by the Mexican government in many other ways.
Yeah, so I think like we'll definitely discuss all this after the presentation, I believe. Like all your points are valid and they're being worked on. This is pretty much the immediate solution right now. Like this is kind of what we're doing to gain time to be able to tackle everything else. Because if we don't do this, by the time we tackle everything else, the vaquita will be gone. And also, like another important point is that there's a big difference between the poachers that are involved on like the whole totoaba trade in terms of like being very lucrative and kind of being compared to narco traffic in a way in terms of like the amount of profit that they earn. Those are not just, usually they're just not like traditional fishermen that are, you know, like starving and then they go out of totoaba. These are people that are, you know, driving the biggest trucks in town, that are having like all this, all the wealthness that this kind of brings to them in a way. It's a very like fine line. Like there's also, of course, like fishermen that do get involved in this because they don't have any other option. But it's a very complicated network, and we'll talk about this a bit as we keep speaking. But anyway, any other questions about the net before we
She had a question for her.
Yeah.
Alice?
Yeah.
To help with works.
Thank you. Give it to Steve. Nice. I clap for you. We put these away. And thank you very much for your help. Let me set it up properly for you, so I don't give you a mess. Thank you. Okay, so next step, so just to touch on this quickly, after we do collect all those nets, we usually process them in a way, so that's why this one, for example, does not have the weight line underneath, because that's like the most expensive part of the net. So we break that down to make sure, you know, whatever, because we never know where those nets are going to end up, like no matter how hard we try to follow a chain of custody. In fact, just a few days ago, the area where we were keeping them they got stolen. So a lot of them got stolen. So at least we take, we try to destroy them as much as possible, so in the event of that happening, they cannot be readily reused again. So we also work with different organizations that recycle them to build different things, like shoes or skateboards or other stuff. So yeah, just quickly, as I was mentioning, like to me, when I first went up to the Gulf, like one of the things that shocked me the most was that you end up forgetting that you're doing all that for the vaquita. Like it's very easy to forget about it due to the amount of other animals that you actually found on those nets. Some of them critically endangered, like a leatherback sea turtle we found, the Pacific one. And we also found like scalloped hammerhead sharks, like actually quite a few of them, and also other types of marine mammals and other animals that even not being endangered, it's also like a shocking different type of species of rays, and of course a lot of fish and even seabirds. So this is a very simple like kind of scale, like I didn't even go down to species or anything, but just to have a bit of an idea, like most of them are fish. The majority of the rest of the animals are different types of rays, but also, as I was saying, we also do find sharks, birds, marine mammals, turtles, and those are kind of like the numbers for you to have an idea of the amount of like animals that get bycatched by these totoaba nets. So the good news is that a lot of them are also still alive when we find them and we're able to release them. So this is just based on the data from the last campaign. I didn't really have time to make a graph of everything. But yeah, so like 33% of all the ones we found were still like freed alive, including totoabas as well sometimes. So that to me like it's also very encouraging. I had a little video, but I think we may be running a bit out of time, or it's okay? Yeah, okay. It's like 3 to 4 minutes, and it just shows you a little bit. Hopefully it loads quickly. So should it open in another window? Yeah, there you go. Sorry. Oh.
Doesn't seem to like that.
It's okay. I can also just send the link. No. It's fine. Don't worry. It just kind of showed the different animals that we may find. 27 almost.
Sounds normal. Sounds nice.
No. Thank you.
Okay. Don't worry, it's fine. Yes, these videos. It's a bit late anyway, and I'm sure the discussion will be super interesting. So it's fine. It just kind of showed a bit like the different species that we may find on the nets and how we actually like release them. But those videos are all available online as well, so I could also, if you're interested, like I could just give you the address and where to find them. So, okay, of course, besides all these other animals that I've talked about, we do find lots of totoabas. Like there's been nets with like up to 30 totoabas on them. There was this one night where we recovered a net with 25 totoabas and all of them were alive, and it's actually one of the most amazing nights I've ever experienced, where like the whole crew were just like freeing these animals from the net and like carrying these, you know, like 30 kilos animals like overboard and just like throwing them and everybody cheering, or they would just like be swimming away. And yeah, and it's like a pretty amazing feeling, and we grasp a lot on those moments, but it's because we do see a lot of death as well and a lot of, you know, like things that are not nice, so those moments are very important. Then also because like I know there's some controversy on this and like some newer studies are needed, but at that moment everybody was like, yes, they are also super critically endangered. So it was like a special feeling of knowing that you were, you know, being able to save a critically endangered animal. The actual state of the total population, the numbers are not like pretty clear in if they should still be critically endangered or they should like be reassessed. That's not my field of expertise, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But that's also like another line of work that's being tackled to try to save the vaquita as well. But again, this is another subject that's pretty complicated in itself. So anyway, just to give you a bit of an idea, that the amount of totoabas that they're like, I mean, they know where to put their nets, and there's like this time of the year, like from December, more or less, up to April, that's like the active totoaba season. And especially from February up to April is like when they're concentrating the most to spawn in the upper Gulf of California, and that's when most of the totoaba fishing happens. And that's why you really do find like these huge amounts of totoabas in one single net, because they're really all of them there.
What are these?
Totoabas. Yeah, so they're pretty huge. Some of them, again, it's up to 2 meters almost. This net especially, I don't know how many of them it had, but this is only a single net. Yeah. So I had another video that this was actually an internal one, but I don't know if it's not gonna play, so it's okay. So I'm just gonna show you. But so what we do, obviously, like we're having like a critically endangered animal in our hands. We're having 25 of them, but not only that, we're having like thousands of dollars on board at this point, because we're not having, you know, any fish. We're having a totoaba fish with a bladder. That's the main issue and the main reason why the vaquita is going extinct. So we cannot just, you know, keep this fish, and we cannot just like throw it as it is. So we have this protocol in place together with Profepa, with one of the Mexican government environmental agencies, a very rigid procedure where we need to cut this animal in 5 parts, in 5 like ventral parts, to make sure that during those cuts, the bladder, which runs like all the way, I don't know what screen to go to, but anyway, the bladder is like very long. It goes like all the way up from here, almost to here. And in females, they're like the most precious ones because they're like the bigger and thicker ones. So that's the ones they're most interested in. But yeah, they run like all the way from here to down here. And they have like 2 kind of like braided long lines like around them. So the way we do it is we like effectuate 5 cuts like around here and along the body to make sure we cover, you know, like the area where the bladder is. And then we dispose that animal back to the ocean. That whole process has to be filmed with a GoPro that like, we have a scientist on each one of the ships to record all this information on the nets and on the animals that come on board. And they have a GoPro on their heads where they're like filming constantly what they're doing with the animal. Because one of the critics, you know, that we get most is like, oh, they're keeping all the bladders and they're selling them and they're rich. And I'm like, yeah, I actually brought one to show you. And then, so yeah, they keep saying all that stuff. So then we kind of need to be super careful on the whole, again, chain of custody of what we're doing. We also have to record the coordinates where we have dropped them, at what time we did it, and we give all that information to Profepa to keep track on it, no? Because at the end of the day, it's a proof of a crime that's being committed. So, any questions on this? Yeah.
I have one or two questions. Does anybody know why the Chinese think that the swim bladder is something, or the whatever it's called, the bladder is something beneficial? And is this real, or is it just a myth?
So it's a lot related with traditional medicine. I don't go a lot of the ins and outs of the actual effects or no effects. Like it's all just thought to be like anti-cancerogenous and like have all these properties that are like very valuable. And as I'm understanding, these all come because there was another species of corvina that was very similar to totoabas that were off the coast of China, that kind of like that were the ones providing them with all these bladders that they were using. And then when the population went down, somebody randomly discovered that this fish had very similar bladders and was like on the upper Gulf of California, and that's when the trade started. But it is considered illegal trade. It also is prosecuted in China, and hopefully, you know, they're also like doing their best to stop this, but it's always difficult. There's a lot of levels to work on.
That could be another mode of attack if it really wasn't something that was that beneficial and worth all that money, then the market would disappear.
Yeah, but there's so much involved with illegal wildlife traffic. Like you never really know, like based on meat, there's so much value given to meat, and like there's so much value given to something that's illegal and trafficked that also gives you a social status just to possess it. You know, as I understand, a lot of people just have it dried and like hanged on their walls. So there's like, it's just very hard to work on that level of changing people's mentalities, because it's people that already don't really care, in my understanding, by the moment that they know that they are buying something that's illegal and putting another species at risk.
And you mentioned corvina. Is this a type of corvina?
This is a bass, a sea bass, but they are like pretty similar in terms of like the spawn, like in the upper Gulf, like they have the same kind of like runs, like spawning runs, and they are kind of related in. So, okay, so I'm just gonna jump to this, which is a bit more to tell you how we operate and a bit why do we operate especially during these months, which I've already mentioned a bit, but the higher season for totoaba fishing is from January until April. So here you can see the darker blue is Operation Milagro 3, so that was in 2016 and 17. Then last year, which we escalated a lot in terms of efficiency and efficiency on finding nets especially, it's like the one that's like lighter blue. I'll show you later compared to the one this year because there's a lot behind it. But yeah, last year we were able to be super efficient. We covered like a huge area, not only the Vaquita Refuge, we were able to cover the whole gillnet exclusion zone. And because we believe most of them were poachers, it was pretty easy to identify where they were and go and get those nets. So most of the fishing gear that was retrieved were illegal totoaba nets. Then some long lines and some other times some other fishing gear that were abandoned and left that we also retrieved.
How long did they leave the nets in the water for before they take them out?
So usually they would leave them only a few days, just because first they knew that, you know, the risk of them being pulled out. Second, because that's really all they need on like high totoaba season and spawning season, and that just kind of like diminishes their chances of the net being taken away and also increases the freshness of the product they're getting. Because if they're a bit rotten, they are unable to use them.
And for every net you get, how many do you figure there are?
How many, sorry?
If you get 100 nets, how many more do you think there are? For every net you get, what's your estimate on how many else are out there?
So we kind of guessed that probably at least 100 per day were put out there or removed. Like that, more than 100 per day, that at least 100 to 200 were like present in the water at one time. But it's so difficult to make those estimates because it also relates to what areas are you covering. Like we are not covering everything uniformly, right? So like we cannot say like, oh yeah, we're doing transects and this is what we're seeing. It also got like in the spawning days, in the runs, which like usually concentrate between 2 to 3 days, like it escalates completely. So, you know, and then there's holidays and people don't go out on the holidays to pull nets, like they are stay at home with their families. So you can see those patterns a little bit, but it's hard to say exactly what's in the water.
Do you use drones also to help?
Yeah, so actually I forgot to put any of that in here. But yeah, that's a technique that we used to use more last year where we would see, you know, like panga movements and then we would send a drone to investigate what they were doing and also gather information in the name of the pangas, gather any footage so then we were able to hand it out to the Navy and to the Mexican authorities to initiate a prosecution. 2 of our drones got shot, literally, and sunk, so that's not an activity that they really liked, which is a good sign because that means that it was affecting them. But, yeah.
How far away do you send the drone? In other words, I'm assuming you'd use those to try to find goats that are far enough away that you can't see them from your location. Is that the way it works? Or?
Yeah, I actually don't know what's the range, the exact range of the drone, but yeah, it's the pangas that we are not able to just see visually. Yeah, that we know they're out there because of the radar, but 5 minutes. Uh-oh. Okay, that's good. So anyway, just quickly then, so what happened this year, as you can see, okay, in December, that's when they start putting the totoaba nets out, and we were able to get a lot of them, but that's because after this past SIRVA meeting and after talking with the scientists, we decided that this year we wanted to focus in a critical area of the Vaquita Refuge, which was the one believed to contain most of the vaquitas based in the acoustic monitoring. So we started the season by just going to this area, and that's why in December we got 41 nets, because we were pretty much just patrolling that area. So by December we kind of like caught most of the ones that were there. And then in January, unfortunately, we got attacked twice, like quite violently, to the point that we needed to leave the area. So that's why in January kind of like it dropped. February, we only were able to come back like mid-February, so that's another reason. And then by March, the reason why it increased is because after patrolling that critic area, like we couldn't find any nets, and that meant that we had already like pulled them all. And in a way, we were trying to train the poachers to be away from that area by pulling all the nets on this very critical zone for the vaquita, because they knew that if they were putting them there, they were gonna be taken away straight away. So it's not the best, you know, because they're like still going somewhere else, but at least we got to kind of like secure that area to the point that we weren't finding any totoaba nets anymore. So we started moving a bit more, expanding it, and that's why in March we are finding lots of nets again, because we've moved a bit away from that critic area that we couldn't find any anymore. So to give you an example, I'm gonna show this directly. So all the red dots are all the active totoaba nets, so like the totoaba nets that we found extended and ready to catch animals, or with animals already, since we started in January 2016. So this includes also the efforts of the fishermen that I told you we were collaborating with and Museo de la Ballena. And to show you, like, we covered all this area, found like all this huge amount of nets, but right now we're only like currently focusing on this circle that you're seeing, which is like the area where the vaquitas are believed to be concentrated. And for that reason, the amount of nets is lower, but we believe that the impact is good, because at the end of the day, like, that's really where we believe they are, so we are at least securing that area in a way. So
I have a question.
here, yeah.
In the protected area, what's the distance between the protected area and the shoreline?
I don't remember in miles right now. It's not that far, but it's far enough from like the area that the fishermen prefer, which is mostly like close to the shore, like to this point out here, and like all these areas. So where most of the nets were found before, like where all the red dots were, like that area closer to the shore is where the fishermen stay, and also where the poachers prefer to stay. So this map is very interesting. It shows us like the vaquita refuge, the current one that was actually extended last year from the one that was previously set in 2005. And that square is this zero tolerance area, as we called it, where it's like any nets that are set here, we're gonna pull in like within 24 hours, or we're gonna try to find them and pull within that time. Having two sheets, we would always keep one inside that area, just like searching for any possible nets and observing any possible panga movements. And another one would kind of like start searching outside of that area. And that's why the dots in yellow are the ones in March, because we were kind of like starting to move away from that square. And the previous ones in black, a lot of them were inside the main distribution area for the vaquita. Unfortunately, the one that you see with the red star is the net where the dead vaquita was found. So it was right on the area where we predicted, where the scientists predicted that the vaquitas are. And it was very unfortunate, but at the same time, it helped to push the attention out. And it means if it was going to be dead anyway, better if we find them and we're able to use that event to keep the attention up, and also to show us that at least they're still there, and we know that we are doing good by like patrolling this specific area, because that's where they seem to be. Yeah.
Is that,
So you're saying that from December through March, we found one dead vaquita in that zero tolerance area?
Yeah.
And so that sounds very encouraging. And you're saying that all the nets have been removed from that zero tolerance area.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty solid on that.
Pretty solid.
Yeah.
I want to believe we're pretty solid on that. I want to believe the officers and captains are telling me, I promise you, we're searching 100%, there's nothing.
Good work.
But, yeah. So,
is that due east of San Felipe, or is it
Yeah,
a
so
little bit to the south?
this is San Felipe right here.
Oh, okay,
all
so
the
it's
way down
actually
here.
north.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's right off San Felipe. Mm-hmm. All right, so just quickly, so just to give you context on what's the state on the field right now, this is the attacks that we suffered in January, where we had around 25 pangas being organized and circling around the ship. By that time, we only had one ship. They kind of like throw cocktail molotovs at us and like broke some windows, and that caused us to have to move south to do repairs, and we set up all this netting around the ship, so then if they throw more stuff, it kind of bounces off. It was really good to hear that from the federation, from the cooperatives, that it wasn't any of the legal fishermen, that it was like mainly the poachers, and that they were condemning the violence that we suffered. So this event was identified as mainly Totoga poachers that obviously were trying to push us away, but it didn't really work because we managed to kind of like come back, this time 2 ships, and we had another intent of an attack, but because of being 2 ships, they just learned how to maneuver, and like they kind of just put them away, and since then everything has been fine.
So what are you going to do when they attack you with, what are the cheap?
Sorry, say again?
What are you going to do when they attack you with semi-automatic weapons?
They have already,
They have.
and I've been there.
Okay.
So we have a.
Isn't that saying something to you about how desperate they are and how deadly it could become?
It shows us how we are having an impact, really, on their activities, and we also know the areas where they get more violent. They know themselves as well. Like they have different bands as well. Like it's not just one big kind of like poaching gang, to say it in a way. So we know that the ones northeast are more violent than the ones that fish like on the west and on the south. Between them, they've also had clashes and they've also killed each other between them, and it's like a big issue. So we know that on the northeast area is where they were more violent, and that's where we went when we got shot that time. We have like piracy protocols on board right now set up, so like we have different stages. We know how to act. Actually, we have 2 military personnel on board and 2 federal police, because we usually also have environmental agency agents coming up with us, so they also are there to protect them and to protect us. So it's risky. It's not an easy operation to be taken for sure, but that doesn't mean that it's not necessary to be done. So we try to be as safe as possible towards them and towards us, like both. We don't want anybody to get hurt of any side. So, but we just need to keep going with what we're doing. So I think that's about it. I was just gonna, for the purpose of giving you the real, right now, like what's happening these days. Since the fishermen started going out as a protest to fish for chano and corvina, we obviously have been finding more pangas out there, and that's been a bit of an issue. But at the same time, their modus operandi is completely different, so they are required to sit with their nets and with their buoys. So we see them, we're sitting there with their buoys, so when we find them, we pretty much just ask them to remove their net and go a bit farther away from the critical area. We kind of show them, they recognize the Vaquita refuge, but mostly the ones set in 2005. They don't really understand that it was extended. So we're actually asking them to kind of move away from the refuge, and for them is to move away from the old one. But in my opinion, it makes sense, because if we use the newer one, there's nowhere they can go, because that's the area where they're fishing, and that's not necessarily anywhere where the vaquitas are believed to be. So we are trying to enforce especially the area that is shaded in gray, which is the most problematic area, because it's also where a lot of the fish is. So that's where they want to be, and that's where we found the dead vaquita, and that's the major overlap problematic zone. But we're actually being pretty good at just speaking. We just kind of go panga to panga, have conversations, tell them, this is the high risk area, we respect your nets, we have nothing against legal fishermen, and we actually kind of want to work as a block, because the more they take over, the less space there is for poachers to put their nets out there. So it's kind of working well, and we have some meetings hopefully coming up, so in that sense it's kind of working. We know we're both going to be out there, so there's no point in being enemies, because we are not enemies. We are going mainly against the poaching, and we understand that these communities need to thrive and to keep going with their activities, and that the gill net ban affected them a lot. So that's who am I to tell them what they need to do to survive, So it's more about just working together, and that's pretty much what we're doing right now. And just to finish with this, and then we can jump directly to or it's about the map. Sorry, the question.
No, just a question of the net. So you're allowing smaller mesh nets? Is that what you're respecting?
So we are not allowing or respecting necessarily. Obviously, we do believe those also pose a risk to the vaquita. But the fact is that those are the fishermen from San Felipe. There's a big gap between that and the poachers. And then they are gonna need to keep going fishing if they're not receiving compensations, or like until the government at least sets something properly up for them. So what we don't wanna be is just like enemies with everyone, because there's no point if we all wanna protect the ecosystem in the same way. So the way they operate is they sit with their nets. In theory, they tell us they're very careful and they are watching them, and you know, they never really go far from the nets and they're always there. So in a way, they're way less dangerous than the Totoaba ones, also because it's believed that if a vaquita found one of those nets, they also kind of like bounce off like any bigger species with smaller mesh. So we're kind of figuring this out as it goes, because the situation also changes every day. We also have suffered attacks, so we cannot be confrontational because we don't need to be and we don't want to be. So we're trying to navigate this area right now this way, just like asking them to move away from the critical zone. They understand, they move. Also, otherwise we kind of get caught with their nets. They don't want their nets to be destroyed either. So it's working. I mean, they are kind of moving away. So that's good, and that's something, a work in progress that we're doing right now. We just need to understand that the situation is different than last year. Last year there were no legal fishermen out there, so it was easy to identify that anybody that was out there were poachers. But right now it's just different, and we need to operate different. Yes?
What's the documented mortality to vaquita by the longline fishing?
Very low, I believe. Like, I don't know how many have been reported. The long line at that point of legal exclusion zone, I think it was more related that long lines were also put for Totoabas, mostly. Right. So by banning that, we're also banning more Totoaba fishing.
And is deployed mid-water or along the bottom, or?
Long lines?
Yes.
They're also anchored in the bottom.
But how far above the bottom or at the bottom?
I don't know exactly, not at the bottom exactly, like they are floating, but I don't know exactly at what depth.
Usually we can see them on the surface.
They're usually close to the surface.
Yeah, the ones we found for Totoaba, the same as the nets, they don't leave surface markers because they don't want them to be seen or to be taken, and we usually just catch them by towing.
The ones that we see just crossing the Gulf that are fishing for everything else, they may have a marker every 10 to a mile or something like that.
Yeah, usually legal fishermen will have, or any other, you know, specifically Totoaba they never have. Like these other fishermen that are out there, they do put buoys and everything. Yeah.
I just have a question, if there's any programs that were going on, if you're aware of any programs that were actually trying to cultivate the Totoaba so that the fishing was...
Yeah, so there is a lot of controversy related to that as well. In terms of, first, that usually a bladder to be profitable needs to be more than 10 years old, more or less. So that means that, you know, that window of aquaculture for Totoabas, they would need to be like, you know, like way too long, like for that the vaquita has. Another problem is that, you know, they've been talking a lot about genetic markers, or how do you distinguish then what bladder comes from where. And I know that a lot of the scientists are not comfortable with that specifically. And we're also not comfortable a lot with the possible impact of high-scale Totoaba aquaculture in an area like the Upper Gulf. And I'm personally very scared of that by now. But it seems to be so many issues that it's also difficult, because I do understand that it's also seen as an opportunity for the communities to be employed too. But yeah, I'm very scared of that not being done properly and causing an impact. So, I don't know.
Well, just hold on one second. So if you have one last slide, let's get to that, and then we can break more into this.
Yeah. So this is kind of it. Like I was just gonna show you. This is again from the past few days, and this is so if you're not familiar with a radar screen, these dotted lines that are here, I don't know if you can see them, more or less. That's the critical zone, and all the yellow dots are pangas that are running around. So there's definitely quite many pangas inside the critical area for the vaquitas. So right now, that's why for us it's a very important job to try to engage with them and ask them to please just kind of like move away to the surrounding areas, because it's an issue and they're actually kind of doing it. But again, the most problematic area is this northwest part of the box that I was showing you before, where it's like most of them comes